Hi, this is Jack Stanley, and I wanted to talk about early recording, an early recording of political figures and figures of note. You know, in the 1890s, they started making recordings, and politicians were not usually ones to want to make commercial recordings. And you know, our first political recordings in the United States, the first recordings made in which a candidate would speak was the year 1908. Everything before was not the candidate. Now, there were special recordings made of Vice President Hobart making a speech. Sadly, there is no recording of Grover Cleveland. There is a recording of Benjamin Harrison made either in 1900 or 1901, dealing with the Pan American Conference. It was made for Bettini, I believe. But the thing is that recordings by candidates were not made by the candidates until 1908. In many, many cases, like the last speech of William McKinley at the Pan American Exhibition. At the Pan American Exhibition, of course, he spoke before a large audience, and there was no way to make a recording. Now, I want to explain something. And I see also on the internet, we have recordings of William McKinley, and we also have Grover Cleveland speaking. But in order to make a recording in the early days of acoustic recording, which sadly we don't understand, it would require you to speak into a horn. And you would have to speak like this to make an acoustic recording. I have made hundreds of acoustic recordings. I understand what I'm talking about with acoustic recording. If you hold the horn back, you don't get much signal, because this is how it works. You speak in the horn works to a diaphragm. The diaphragm vibrates, and there's a needle on the end of that diaphragm that cuts into warm wax. That's how you make a recording. So, the further you are away from the horn, the weaker the signal. If you're on this side of the horn, you get nothing. You might get a faint, faint echo. And so many of these recordings by candidates beforehand, of Cleveland, of McKinley, which I hear on the internet, in which they're speaking, and then an audience cheers. The only way the audience can cheer is if the audience are behind them. It can't be on this side of them, because they won't get a signal. They won't get the vibration. That is why I believe that every recording I have heard of a previous president is not that president. It is a studio recording made with an actor reading the voice or the speech of the candidate. And then suddenly, behind them, yay, and applauding, and then it's over. It doesn't last. If you give a speech, there's applause here and there and everywhere. But on these studio recordings, it's very, very noticeable. There's one moment where they cheer. That's it. Listen to the Cleveland recording. Listen to the McKinley recording. You will hear it. It's very, very identifiable, very much like a fingerprint, that there's studio recordings. In 1908, the first recordings of candidates were done. The first, and there's no cheering, because it was the real candidate. They were giving a speech. They didn't need to hear cheers. The cheers would be on the other side of the horn, the people listening to the recording. That's the difference. And that's a very important thing to realize. In the history of sound recordings, there's a lot of fakes. And in the sense of many of these early recordings made, they weren't made to be fakes, but they were made to demonstrate the speech of that president, not the president themselves. And so that's caused a lot of controversy. It's caused a lot of problems. But believe me, all you have to do is listen to them, and you will hear all the earmarks of a studio recording with the audience behind the speaker talking into the horn. Because if they're on this side of the horn, you aren't going to hear them. Very important point. Thank you.